Thank you again to Kenzie and our music ministry. So we are on week 6 of our 7-week study program based on The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And there's quite a few of you that are involved in your spirit groups. There's quite a few of you that are just following along. And I don't know where you're at with some of what Michael Singer has been sharing, but I want to tell you that for me, it's been really eye-opening. It's really invited me to look at where I am in life, and as we were coming together to today talk about unconditional happiness, I just remember like halfway through the week, I was in my car just thinking about today, and I thought to myself, can I say that I'm unconditionally happy, right? Like I'm gonna speak about unconditional happiness. Could I say that I actually live it? Could I say that I am able to, stop myself from whatever is happening in the world outside of me and remember that there is a deep sense of joy? And you know what my answer was? Sometimes. And that may be your answer also, right? Like sometimes we are in that energy of recognizing the deep joy that is within us and the joy that we can tap into. For, we in Unity believe that God is that joy and God is the essence of our being. And so I know in my head, right, that there is this deep spring of joy within me. Now, my experience of it changes from day to day, from moment to moment. I think I'm a pretty happy guy. If you know me, if you've been around me, I think I'm a pretty happy guy. I think I'm a pretty joyful individual, and I think it's one of the things that I like the most about myself, And let me tell you, I have my moments of not being so happy. I have my moments of anger. I have my moments of forgetting. But the reality is that I think that's just part of the human condition, that we are all sort of holding for ourselves this goal of being happy. And we get to sort of play in life to see where we are at with that. One of the things that I also realize is, today's, the theme in the book is unconditional happiness. And I do believe that we can get to a place of unconditional happiness, but I think the first step is just recognizing unconditional joy, right? Because joy is that energy that is within us, regardless of the situation that is going on outside of us. Happiness is our expression of that joy. And so first and foremost, I gotta tap into and recognize that the God of my being is a joyful energy, a joyful consciousness, and then look at the things that are sort of blinding me or in the way of me expressing and living into happiness. Because it doesn't matter about what's happening in the world outside of us, right? It's our experience of it. It's how we relate to it. Even last week, Chris was talking about fear. And it's not about not having fear. It's what is our relationship to fear? How do we allow fear to either hold us back or bring us into a greater understanding of our path and our truth? And I could, bore you with that joke that we've told many a times here, about this idea of what we're clinging on to. Because for me, to recognize more fully that deep sense of joy and the way in which I can express happiness is about looking at what I'm clinging onto that doesn't allow me to be enfolded by joy or enfold joy itself. And think about that. Whenever we are holding on to something, right? Holding on to something, we're not able to just open up our arms and welcome this sense of joy, welcome this sense of God as a blessing in our lives. And so what are we clinging on to? What are the things that are keeping us from using our energy to experience a greater sense of joy? And so there's that joke, right? Like the guy that is walking on the ledge and falls off, and before he falls to the ground, he grabs onto the branch. Some of you remember that joke? Right? He grabs onto the branch and he starts screaming up to whoever can listen, "Help, help, somebody help me." And all of a sudden he hears this booming voice and says, "I will help you, my child." And the guy says, help me, who are you?" "This is God." I will help you. God, please help me. I will do whatever you need me to do. I won't sin again. I won't use your name in blasphemy. I will do anything you ask me to. Just save me. And God said, let go of the branch. And the guy says, anybody else up there? Right? But think about that. How many times are we clinging on to the branches, to the fears, to whatever situation we may be going through, and we do hear that still small voice that says, let go. Let go, let God, as Chris was sharing with us in the last couple of weeks. But we cling on so hard that we're not able to see. And this vision came to me of, and I think we probably all have experienced some of this, right? Where it's almost like we're clinging on to something, afraid of falling, and we are so scared that we haven't looked down to see that we're just like a few inches off the ground. And the moment we let go is the moment that we can stand in our truth, is the moment that we can stand firmly in our faith, only if we're willing to let go, only if we're willing to look at the things that we're clinging on to that are keeping us from fully embracing the joy and the faith and the trust and all that God is in our lives. Now, we tend to cling on to the things that, for whatever the reason, we thought were going to keep us safe. Right? And Chris talked about that. Some of the systems that we've created for ourselves to keep us safe from feeling the pain. And all of a sudden we get lost in it, right? And it's just the way that we've done things. And so we're not sure what is on the other side of it. And we're so fearful of just feeling into the pain or feeling into whatever it is that is moving through us that we shut ourselves off. We may be clinging on to how life is supposed to be. We may be clinging on to how I'm supposed to be showing up, how each of us are supposed to be showing, how the other person is to be showing up. But think about it. What are you clinging on to that is no longer serving you? And how can you use that energy, because it takes a whole lot of energy to cling on to something. How could you let go and release that energy so that you can use that energy to really move you into the spaces that you want to move into, that place of unconditional joy, that place of unconditional happiness, that place of trust and faith? Now, it's really interesting for me because I share with you quite a bit about my son, Lucas. But the reality is because, my gosh, the stuff that I'm learning through my relationship with him. And I don't know why, something kind of just showed up for me a couple of weeks ago. Lucas can get really stuck on certain things that are going on, or when he gets, when we tell him that something needs to happen, he'll answer back with the way that he thinks it should happen, or he's not gonna do it, or whatever the case. And my question that has come up for me and that I keep asking him is it worth it? Right? Like, is it worth it to fight? Is it worth it not to do what we're asking you to do? Is it worth it? And he comes to his own understanding of that. But the question is, if you're thinking about the things that you're clinging on to, asking yourself, is it worth it? Is the fear of falling worth you holding on so tightly to something that may no longer serve you? Is the fear of not knowing what is within us or what is on the other side of a situation enough to worth enough to just hold on to the past or the way that you think life should be? Is it worth it? And the more I realize it, the more that when I say to Lucas, is it worth it? The more I'm being reminded of how powerful that question can be, right? Is it worth it to me to live in the past? Is it worth it for me to live in what I think the future may look like rather than just being in the present moment? And Michael Singer actually tells us in these chapters that more than even the power of the question, is it worth it, is the one question he thinks we all need to just answer for ourselves, which is, do we want to be happy? Do you want to be happy? Do I want to be happy? Do we want to be happy? And really sit with that question because, instinctively, I think we all say yes, right? Do you want to be happy? Yes. But Michael Singer tells us that is not only a question that we must answer in this moment, but that's a question that we must commit ourselves to. Because we can say yes in the present moment, and what happens when something shows up? Can we be present to our choice, to our commitment to be happy? And so as I was looking at this, you remember what would Jesus do? WWJD? You know, WWJD? It came to me to think about, what would joy do? What would joy do? A new way of seeing that J. What would joy do in this moment? If I am choosing happiness, right, as a way of being, then what would joy do in any situation when life comes at me, when something that I don't like shows up? What would joy do? And if joy is trying to express itself, I think that joy would be open, right, to asking the question, how can I experience happiness in this moment, regardless of what's going on? Mary Kupferle, who is a Unity minister, wrote once, "Joy belongs to you whether you know it or not. It is yours now to discover, to use, to exercise, and to bring into expression. Joy belongs to us. It is up to us to choose moment by moment what would joy do and allow ourselves to move into it and express it in different ways, whatever that way may be for us." Now, one of the things that Michael Singer says is that the moment that we make that choice to be happy, that choice to live in joy, all of these different tests can show up. How many of you, when you say, I'm really committed to going this way, have experienced all of a sudden what seems like blockage, right? What blocks? Now, in Unity, we've talked about this before. In Unity, we have this idea called chemicalization. How many of you remember chemicalization? Some of you. So chemicalization is this idea that all the guck, all the negative thoughts, all the negative beliefs that we may be holding sort of have to come up. And so the moment that we are committed to a different way of living, to a divine idea, such as the divine idea of joy, everything that is in our body, everything that is in our mind that is in opposition to that idea of joy has to come up for healing. It's like the cleanse, right? Like the time that you go into a cleanse, the first couple of days of a cleanse, you don't feel so good because all those chemicals have to be released from your body. The same thing happens with us in mind, right? The moment that we choose joy, the moment that we choose happiness, anything that is within us that is in opposition to that choice has to come up for healing. The fears, the stress, the anxiety, the beliefs of not being good enough or worthy to experience joy. How many of us have had those moments where we recognize, man, I really just didn't believe that I was worthy of being happy in this relationship or being happy at work, right? And so we have to allow ourselves to just, even when the stuff shows up, to hold strong to that commitment and that choice that we are making moment by moment to be happy, to remember that there is a deep sense of joy within us. And so we get to be committed to this unconditional way of being that is in itself the curriculum. See, those experiences that may seem in opposition of us living into our truth, such as the truth of joy within us, it's really just our practices to get more clear about who we are and the power that is within us. And one of the things that I like to remind myself of is, and I got this from a prosperity program that I did many, many years ago. What are our beliefs about God? What are our beliefs about God? Who do we believe God to be? I believe God to be the energy of love. I believe God to be the energy of joy. I believe God to be the energy of wisdom. And you've heard that old adage, if you want to know somebody more fully, walk in their shoes. Well, if we want to know God more fully, how about we walk in the shoes of God? How about we really embody more and more this essence of love and joy and peace that is within us? And we know what joy feels like, right? We know what it does to us because we've experienced it. You know, Michael Singer says that joy just feels very expansive. Right? Joy feels expansive. It feels like there is movement outward, that we are giving of ourselves, and not being in joy or being in fear. What does it feel like? Constrictive. So what's the choice going to be? Do we want to feel expansive or do we want to feel constrictive? And then the moment that we are experiencing whatever we may be experiencing, if we ask the question, what would joy do? How can I be committed to happiness in this moment? We can recognize, are we feeling constricted in this moment? And how can we allow ourselves to feel more expansive? How can we maybe view this situation a little differently? How can we show up in this situation a little differently? And the invitation is to not close our heart. Because a lot of times when life gets tough, we want to get tough, right? When life gets difficult, we want to close off ourselves from experiencing that. And this is a lot of what is in the untethered soul, is the ability to recognize that even the things that make us feel uncomfortable, even the things that are challenging and difficult, are actually here to serve us, are actually an invitation for us to not move away from them, but to actually just allow ourselves to be with it. And the moment that we allow ourselves to be with the discomfort is the moment that then we can just take a moment, take a pause, and ask, what would joy do now? How can I express the joy that is already within me? And how can I, even in this situation, feel happy about it? When I was putting this together, I was thinking, well, I really want to just focus on joy, because joy doesn't matter what's going on outside. But I don't only want to experience joy, I want to express happiness. And so I do believe that it is possible. I do believe that it is part of our journey. The question is, how willing am I to do the work so that I can move into it more fully? Now, one of the things that I think we get invited into is to recognize that in every moment, in every activity, we get to also choose not only happiness and joy, but the way to get there. And the way to get there, there's a choice between our human will and divine will. See, our human will is the one that clings on to the past, is the one that clings on to the things that no longer serve us. It's the ego, right? It's the ego that wants to have control over things that we may not have control over. But the divine will is the will of God, and that will resides in us. Allow ourselves to be open to those answers is the moment that we get revealed to us a greater sense of happiness. For it is no longer determined by what is happening outside of us, but what is within us asking to be expressed. Joy. How can we choose joy today? I love the way that Michael Singer ends one of his chapters. It's so simple, but it's so true, and such a place of us anchoring ourselves. This is a beautiful path. Simply be happy. Let us all own our joy. Let us all express our happiness. And let us all make that choice to ask moment by moment, what would joy do now? And allow that to be the path that we move forward in. Thank you, and namaste.